Ladies and gentlemen and water warriors around the world, welcome to this, the 8th Waterkeeper podcast, coming to you live from COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland. I'm Casey Schulberg, Collier County Waterkeeper, and your host for these daily live podcasts, along with my friend and colleague, the Kissimmee Waterkeeper, Dr. John Capece. So just to resume, COP stands for Conference of the Parties. These are annual United Nations meetings devoted solely to climate change. The first one was held in 1995 in Berlin. This is the 26th. The one you probably all know about is COP21, where the Paris Climate Accord was signed. Next, I want to talk about that North Star everyone is striving for, holding temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. First, I want to remind you all that we're talking about Celsius. In Fahrenheit, that would be 2.7 degrees. And we are already at 1 or 1.2 degrees Celsius, if not more. By all accounts, we are beyond hope of holding to 1.5. At 2 degrees Celsius, we start to see cascading catastrophic impacts far greater than the wildfires, droughts, flooding, hurricanes that we are seeing today. So that North Star may actually be an asteroid heading our way. That's why we're all gathered here. There has been some progress inside the conference. Monday night, 100 nations signed the protocol to stop deforestation by the end of the decade. Tuesday, more than 100 countries joined the US and the EU in an effort to cut emissions of methane from 2020 levels by 30% by the year 2030. Wednesday, 450 firms, part of the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, pledged $130 trillion, representing 40% of global assets, to align themselves with the Paris Agreement 1.5 Celsius warming limit. Those agreements, if honored, have serious mitigation potential. And there have been some second-tier agreements along the way. But since Thursday, no major agreements, just crickets. Or maybe I should say locusts. We shall see what week 2 brings. But today in Glasgow is Sunday. The conference is closed for today. It's a rest day. The massive protests of Friday and Saturday have ended. Glasgow was quiet today. So our videographer and our tech wizard, Michal Fidler, took the day to get out of Glasgow and show us some of the surrounding countryside. So let's share some of his images with you now.
Well, I had a day off, finally. So after the 2 days in the protest, I was feeling that I wanted to be alone, maybe just go to some forest, see some streams, see some rivers. So let me show you a few images I took today. Scotland is definitely full of water. I just took it as the theme for today, take some images of water. It's everywhere, so you get soaked and wet pretty much every single day. On the other hand, the positive thing is that it's also everywhere around in the air. That's why the forests are so green. The parks are super green. It's middle of November, but it's still super green. Here would be another photo of water. This would be the mouth of the River Clyde coming out of Glasgow, and one of the ferries just swinging between the peninsulas. Yet another image of a ferry, because there are many of them. I walked by a few streams, and when I was taking this photo, I thought for a minute maybe I was at Pandora, the planet from Avatar, because it was so beautiful. Of course, 5 minutes later it started to rain, so it was not that beautiful, but for those few minutes it was amazing. And again, yet another stream. I basically had to just put the tripod on the ground, push the button, and that was it. I did not really have to think about the images, because the area is so beautiful. I also wanted to see some farmlands, so I walked up few hills up. And here would be an example of a farm, and of course there were some farm animals. Here would be sheep. It's either green, where the sheep graze, or it's kind of brownish, which we can see in the background. Also, there were a few horses around. When I got back home, Casey was asking how many cows I saw. Actually, I saw none, but I saw few horses and many sheep. Obviously, Scotland is full land of castles, so I wanted to see some castles as well. I got quite lucky that I bumped into this one. I am not even trying to pronounce the name of the castle. It's just terribly difficult. That would be another mini castle. This is actually just a watchtower. The castle is right next to it, but it's at the mouth of the River Clyde again. This would not be really a castle. This would be just an abbey. Really, all these images are taken within 5-10 miles from Glasgow. So just an abbey in a village called Paisley. And for some reason, they were having a light festival. So in the evening, they just put lights on all the buildings and all on the abbey, and it looked very, 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 very colorful. And here are a few more images of the colors, because the colors here are so bright. So although people say it's
Thank you, Michael. Those are fantastic images. Yeah. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that. John, you were at the conference yesterday in the Water Pavilion, where you caught up with a woman named Silvia Gaya, who's an advisor for UNICEF. So tell me a little bit about that discussion and what you guys covered.
Well, first, I'd like to mention that this day of rest is very much needed by me in particular. It's been a grueling week since we did the conference at University of Florida, and then came here and immediately embarked upon the marathon conference attendance. Also, the video clip we're going to see is something that I produced. Michael had nothing to do with it. Anything that Casey or Michael touch is much higher quality than what you're going to see here. But Silvia has some important information, and she's one of the primary organizers of the COP26 Water Pavilion. She's not part of the UNFCCC that organizes COP and its negotiations, but she's from another arm of the UN, UNICEF, that we all know is focused on the welfare of children globally. After the clip, we can discuss some of the points raised in her comments.
And welcome to the Water Pavilion. We are very proud to announce that this is the first ever Water Pavilion in a COP. So we are super proud of having achieved this massive milestone. And to do that, there has been a set of 32 organizations that have really worked together and collaborate strongly to make the case that water has been always absent in these global discussions. We don't understand why, don't ask me why, but this is our realization that actually water is really missing in the picture. And while at the same time, we see that water is really contributing to a greatly to the climate agenda, right? This pavilion has been structured across all the days in the COP, and we have chosen one thematic day every day. So for instance, we started on day one, that was 1st of November indeed, on the race to zero. The day after we talk about financing, the other day was on energy, there was another day on nature-based solutions, another day on the Marrakesh agreements. Today is the Climate Resilient Wash Day, so we are also very proud as a sector, water and sanitation and hygiene sector, to be having here one dedicated day in the Water Pavilion for the sector of water, sanitation and hygiene. And next week they continue with adaptation and resilience, with big cities, with transboundary waters, and so on. So we cover every day with this. And then every day has been structured with different sessions. really consolidating the work that a lot of partners do in this area, right? For instance, today was the Climate Resilient Wash Day, and we have had 4 big sessions, and we have invited all of the organizations that are really working in the sector to really showcase what is our message. And basically our message from the climate resilient water and sanitation and hygiene is very simple. The messages are mainly 3. The first one is that as a water and sanitation sector, we are very much affected by the changes in climate. And therefore, every time that there is a climate shock, our sector suffers because there is less water, because there are floodings, because there is saline intrusion in the coastal areas in a lot of countries, because the snow is melting from the glaciers, and therefore this water source for thousands of people or millions of people is not available anymore. So it's important to understand that we are very much affected, and therefore all the countries that are very heavily affected by changing climate are in need to adapt their sector, their services, to be able to cope with these climate shocks, right? So this is one key message. The second one is that despite we are very affected by the climate change, we are also part of the solution. Why? Because by constructing and providing climate resilient water, sanitation, and hygiene services, we are able to contribute to the global adaptation agenda and the global mitigation agenda. And of course, without forgetting that we also contribute to the economic and social development agenda, to the peace agenda also. But this is to say that all the interventions that are climate resilience help enormously to build resilience in the communities, to build resilience from the service themselves, water, sanitation, hygiene, and also because we use renewable energies, we are having also a case on how our sector is really contributing to the mitigation agenda. So we contribute to both the race to zero and the race to adaptation greatly through our sector. And of course, this has a huge impact on communities, right? Because we connect this with livelihoods, we connect this with job generation, income generation, and ultimately, in the places very much affected by water scarcity, we see that this is one of the drivers of conflict. So ultimately, we are able to use and to channel these water and sanitation services in a way that we can increase community cohesion and ultimately peace.
I ended the clip there on the issue of peace and conflict, because it's a very important point when it comes to this climate change challenge. But the third point she goes on to make is concerning return on investment. You know, nations need to be assigned priority to water and sanitation because it's really at the foundation of a community, at the foundation of an economy. So it constitutes a good investment to put resources into not only expanding the sector, but doing it in a more energy compatible manner with our mitigation priorities. So first, I want to mention that, you know, WASH projects, water, sanitation, hygiene, are very near and dear to my heart. Not only is it the first word in our WATERKEEPER mandate, drinkable, but I've worked on a number of WASH projects over the decades. Some of my international interns went on to very rewarding careers in UN WASH programs and other NGOs. One was, in fact, for many years leading the UNHCR, the High Commission for Refugees team that designed and constructed water and sanitation systems at many of the sprawling UN refugee camps throughout Africa and the Middle East. So wherever there's conflict and instability, water and sanitation rushes to the top of the humanitarian priority list. And when people ask me about climate change and its threat to humanity, I often tell them that I don't really anticipate climate change getting the opportunity to kill people in mass numbers I tell them that it's more likely to simply shove us into one another, and then we'll do all the killing. But it's my observation beyond this conflict and security issue, and the need to reduce greenhouse gases, the driver of climate change, that the COP agenda, the conference agendas are increasingly focused on climate change adaptation and resiliency, and less on the actual mechanics and science and technology of preventing climate change. So another observation is that many of the industries and services are doing their best to represent their sector in the context of climate change relevancy, either through they're providing of mitigation, resiliency, or adaptation services. The overall context is that all industries and public service sectors like water and sanitation seek to expand. They seek to grow because the population's growing. And not only is the population growing, but people's expectations of standard of living are also increasing. So the water and sanitation falls into this category. It needs to be expanded, but it constitutes 3 to 7%, as we talked about yesterday, 3 to 7% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So we have to be able to expand the industry, but at the same time, hold stable or reduce, or even potentially figure out ways to make this sector carbon negative. So it's an enormous challenge. The Water Pavilion had a wide range of presentations yesterday, and as you heard from Silvia over the prior days, and I'll be looking forward to revisiting the pavilion in the coming week and joining in those discussions again. So Casey.
The question of sustainability and what with all this upheaval, migration caused by climate change, social unrest, these are pretty disquieting issues that you bring up, John. And I think the UN has a whole other department really designed to provide services for disadvantaged people, and that's definitely got to be part of the picture. Including, the developed countries providing the funds to see that happen, to support that. And that's pretty scary stuff when you think about that. The danger is not from climate change itself; it's from ourselves when we're so desperate that we're sort of at each other's throats. That's a terrifying proposition. Thanks, John. Thanks for that. So we're going to shift over to our main interview of the night. As we've been saying all week, these podcasts are made by waterkeepers and for waterkeepers. The waterkeepers are a noble breed. They have multiple and surprising talents. Some are lawyers, some scientists, some are social justice warriors. Bruno Monteferri, the Maranon waterkeeper in Peru, is one of those hyphenates. He's an environmental lawyer, an activist, an athlete, a waterkeeper, and he's a filmmaker. Bruno has just completed a beautiful documentary called El Rugir del Maranon, which I probably mispronounced in Spanish. My apologies. It translates to the roar of the Maranon. The film is set to premiere in December, but Bruno and his team have opened an exclusive window to those watching tonight to see the entire movie if you log on within the next 48 hours. So the link to that to access the movie is at the end of the trailer, and we'll also post it to our Facebook page. And before we show the interview with Bruno, I just wanted to share with you the trailer to Bruno's movie, Roar of the Maranon.
It's the source of the Amazon. I mean, environmentally speaking, I think it's one of the most important rivers in the world. It's hard to argue against that.
El Perú necesita convertirse en una gran potencia energética de Sudamérica.
Dicen que es un proyecto que va a generar desarrollo, dicen, pero el desarrollo no creo que sea para nosotros, pues.
Si nosotros nos enteremos qué quieren, ¿por qué lo hacen así privado? Aquí están entrando solo los que les han sido pagados nomás.
La gente está dispuesto a luchar hasta el último.
Big dam building companies know that they can't fool us anymore. So they're going to Latin America where they think it's a softer target for them, that they can pay off a few people in government and they can get these things built.
Hay una desproporción en la lucha.
All this forest, all this canyon would be completely underwater.
En las orillas del río Marañón a nosotros no vamos a permitir.
No queremos que esta situación se desangre más, no queremos más víctimas, no queremos más muertos.
Tenemos un suelo, un sueño y una vida.
¿Por qué quieren represar el Marañón? El Marañón no se va a represar.
So as you see, that's a beautifully made movie, and the movie really talks about how Bruno is fighting to keep the Maranon from being dammed. It was a little hard maybe to read the link for the Vimeo link, so you may have been scrambling for a pen to write it down. We will post it in the Facebook page, and so you may want to tune in. That link will be open for the next 48 hours. And it's kind of exclusive because the movie is not set to be seen by anyone until December. So we're getting a kind of sneak preview from it. So now I'd like to share the interview that we did with Bruno, the director of the movie and the Maranon Waterkeeper in Peru. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about the interview. So Bruno, in your honor, I'm wearing this mask that a friend of mine from Lima gave me, and it's so beautifully made. It's also very thick, so nothing is getting through this mask. It's beautifully made. So this is a Peruvian mask, and I cherish it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome Bruno Monteferri, who is the Maranon River Waterkeeper. And Bruno has been working tirelessly to see that the Maranon River remains undammed. Bruno, tell us about the Maranon and your passion for this river.
It's a pleasure. And yeah, I would like to take you all to this amazing river that is actually a source of the Amazon River. The Maranon River, together with the Ucayali River, make the Amazon River. And it's one of the most important rivers in Peru and also of the Amazon Basin. Back in 2004 and until 2014, the Peruvian government decided to declare as of national interest to dam the Maranon, and there were 20 dam projects that were declared as of national interest, one after the other one. It was in that moment, back in 2014, 2015, that we started to try to defend the Maranon from these ideas from the government, mainly because there's no the legal framework that would be the one that prevents that very significant damages could be done to rivers by any infrastructure projects. Do not consider cumulative impacts. Do not consider the role of sediments. That I would have to say that that's, for me, has been the main lesson learned while trying to be an activist for this river. The sedimentation, the role of the sediments that big rivers that connect the Andes with the Amazon play, it's crucial for the Amazon and the ecosystem services that provided. You have to understand that this river comes from the high Andes in the Huayhuash Cordillera, which is said to be one of the most where you can do one of the most beautiful hikes in the world. And all these rocks that start to come down with the landslides and the earth like start to flow to the river. The river becomes quite muddy. It's a brown river on the rainy seasons. And the river starts to bring all these sediments down, creates these beautiful sand beaches in the middle canyon of the Maranon. But down in the Maranon Canyon, in the lower Amazon, because you have like the Andes, you have like the Maranon dry forest, and then you go to the lower Amazon. This is a river that is quite long. It's one of the longest in the world. When the sediments stay in the beaches and in the riverians, in the sides of the river, those are the areas that the indigenous peoples use for agriculture when the water levels go down. And it's also those sediments that provide all the nutrients and minerals so that the water has so many nutrients that makes one of the most productive ecosystems in the world. And that's why you have all this diversity of fish in the lower Amazon, in the what we call cochas, which is like little pools that come out from the river in the lower Amazon. So the sediments are key for migratory fish. They're key for the agriculture of people, but also because of the risk of erosion. We already have been seeing what happened in the Codo Sinclair River in Ecuador, where there has been a dam built without taking into account the role of sediments. And now one of the largest waterfalls in Ecuador has disappeared because of the erosion. And what the specialists tell us is that the rivers are just like used to carrying sediments. If you put a big dam in a place, the river is gonna continue to try to do that lower after the dam because it doesn't have sediments and it's used to doing it. So it's gonna try to start to bring sediments from the sides, and the effects that can have are quite significant. And right now, the Peruvian government doesn't require the companies to actually study and do a proper monitoring of these sediments. No, so the good side of this story, Casey, is that since 2014, where Peru was really promoting these mega dams, one of the mega dams was granted to the Odebrecht company, which was very famous because of the Lavallato corruption scandal. The government has stopped giving subsidies to the big mega dams to allow them to be economically feasible and commercially viable. And right now, the Peruvian citizens we have a superavit of electricity. We have a surplus of electricity. So the need for these dams is not the same as how it was framed 6 years ago. And the costs of the alternative renewable energies like solar and wind have reduced a lot. So right now, the dams are not competitive against these other options. And the whole narrative promoting mega dams is not as strong as it was before. And we also know that, and that's very important, that the whole international community continues to doing that, no? So right now, there's only 3 concessions that are still valid in the Maranon that could start building the dams, but they don't have the environmental permits required to begin to do them. No? So we are in a very special moment on this battle, on this endeavor, because right now both of the companies that are the title holders of the largest mega dams are getting closer to the deadline to which they will have to be producing energy, and they will not be able to fulfill that because they don't even have the permits. And what this means is that the Peruvian government needs to terminate these contracts in the March of next year and April of 2023, just based on the contract that they signed with the companies. So right now, what we have been doing is a campaign that includes a documentary called The Roar of the Maranon to try to build this attention to this issue and make everyone understand in Peru that these dams are not the best alternative for Peru, that we have better options to produce electricity that do not create the same harm into one of the most pristine and amazing ecosystems that you will find in the world. And we can talk more about it then. But right now the pressure is going with us, no? But what we're concerned is that due to COVID, the Peruvian government could say that the obligations and the time to comply with the obligations have been suspended, and we are getting no response from the mining and electricity sector until now on these demands.
And how many dams were planned on the Maranon? And you say there are two licenses or two possible permits left, which will expire next year. Is that for the 2 dams that are still in the works or possibilities?
So there were 20 dams declared as of national interest. Mm-hmm. Then 6 concessions were granted, but mm-hmm. today there's only 3 that have a valid concession. Okay. From those 3, there's 2 that are the ones that concern us the most because are the largest dams. One is for Odebrecht, this Brazilian company famous by their corruption scandal. And the other one is from Enel, which is actually one of the leading companies towards the transition towards renewable energies, non-conventional renewable energies. No, so and the other one is still more in a planning phase, and it's not so big. But the one from Enel, we have been trying to talk to the managers of Enel, and they have been really responsive. And they have even required the government to terminate their contract because they're already investing in other projects in Peru. And since 2014, the CEO of Enel has said that they're going to move away from big dams. So we're trying to make them stick to their word. And so far, they have been doing this process with the government to terminate their contract. But the Peruvian government is not even responding to their request to terminate their contract. No, so, but we feel that in this sense, we could have on Enel we can have an ally on Enel, so that the same private companies leading the transition towards more sustainable energies tell the Peruvian government that it doesn't make sense even for them. No, the expectations with Odebrecht are not so high. Odebrecht has been trying to sell all their actives, all the projects that they have to other companies. So the risk there is that they sell the project to a company that doesn't have very high environmental or social standards. No, but in summary, Casey, the thing is that we've been battling for 6 years together with local people and numerous organizations. It's been successful so far. We're getting closer to a moment where we need to put more pressure in Peru and also from international organizations on the Peruvian government, so that they are aware that dams are not the best solution, and that this connection that this kind of huge important rivers create between the Andes and the Amazon, because there's only 6 of these big water basins that connect the Andes with the Amazon, they need to be protected. So what we would like to have now is not only that the dams are not made, but that we improve the environmental and social standards for infrastructure projects in rivers like the Maranon, and also to start looking at a more proactive and propositive plan for the Maranon Canyon, which is such a beautiful place, Casey. I would love to take you there sometime.
It sounds absolutely fabulous. And at the end of this interview, we will show the trailer for your new movie. You made a movie about the Maranon River that we're looking forward to seeing, and we'll play the trailer in just a minute or so. And we will help you get the word out on this movie. Do you have anything you want to say about the relationship of the movie and the renewable energies and what we're trying to accomplish at COP26? Do you have any things you want to add in terms of the importance of COP and what we're trying to accomplish here, and how we can get your word out to the attendees of COP this year?
Yeah, sure. I think on one side, I think it has to be really, it's a very unique moment that when all these commitments that are coming from different governments, well, that we expect to have like really ambitious commitments because we need them to happen, don't make the governments move from coal to hydro dams that creates a huge impact not only in climate because of the emissions that they create and the methane, but also on the biodiversity. I think we have to look at climate change and biodiversity connected, and the impact that these huge hydro dams in rivers like the Maranon will have for climate change, but also for biodiversity, are huge and not usually accounted as they should. No, if you talk about the Maranon, we're talking about the Maranon dry forest, one of the most places with the highest levels of endemisms in the world, up to the point that they're compared to the Galapagos Islands, understudied, underprotected. Only 2% of ecosystems in Peru are protected by the protected area system. And every time like new groups of researchers go, they find new species for science. So we really need to like combine biodiversity and climate in the analysis of the options. And I hope that strong statements come from Glasgow that actually are clear on the fact that hydro dams are not a solution and are not an option as a clean energy, and this is something that we need to emphasize.
We're very much of the same opinion that hydro dams are a false solution, and we should just stop building dams, let the rivers flow, and convert to renewable energies, wind and solar. We're totally in sync with you there, Bruno. And we interviewed Meg Ali, who's fighting to keep the Karnali River free flowing in Nepal, and we're talking to river keepers and water keepers all over the world. A lot of them are of the same opinion. So we support you in your work and your endeavors, and we look forward to seeing the movie, Bruno, and to working with you to get the word out on the important work you're doing there in Lima and in Peru. Thank you so much, Bruno, for spending some time with us and sharing your thoughts and how important it is to keep the Maranon flowing.
Thank you, Casey, for the time, and you're more than invited to come and see a place on your own, and also everyone that is watching. The movie will be, there's a website that we have produced, which is conservamos.org/Ríos Libres. You can go to the Maranon Waterkeeper website and you can be directed to that website, just maranonwaterkeeper.org. And you can sign to a newsletter and then have access to a film that is going to be publicly available in 1 month. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much in advance for all your help.
I have every confidence in you. You're an environmental lawyer, you're an activist, you are a filmmaker, and you are a waterkeeper. So I think you're going to get the job done.
With the help of everyone, I'm sure we can do it. So thank you again, Casey, for your time and support.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Yeah, so I'm so impressed with the waterkeepers all over the world. I've been meeting some this week, and we'll meet some more next week. And it's really a grand federation of passionate people, really smart, passionate individuals doing great work all over the world. So John, do you have any comments on the interview or the trailer or the movie or Bruno's work, or anything you want to say in summation where we stand at the conference as of the end of week 1?
Well, first, I want to, double down on your comment about the amazing waterkeepers that we have all over the world. And this is just a tremendous example. But his talk emphasizes or drives home the water energy nexus and water climate nexus that is the focus of the Water Pavilion, that has been the focus of the work of many of us over the decades. Sometimes the water is the primary driver for the energy generation, like we see in a hydroelectric dam generating plant, or it's the cooling water in the thermodynamic cycle of nuclear, coal, natural gas, what have you. Or it can be a primary consumed commodity in the fabrication of solar panels, wind turbines, or any other hardware. So it's important to quantify the water impacts of any energy system that we develop or seek to apply widely. And this overall issue of keeping track is this better than that is an important theme. And I think I'll pull together a few slides on that topic, and we'll discuss it later in the week. But it's addressed to a certain extent in some of the analytical methods like life cycle assessment, where it provides the impacts of any goods or services from both the nutrient, the energy, the greenhouse gas, as well as water implications. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But another thing he talked about was the sedimentation, the sediment dimensions. And as an agricultural engineer, I've taken a number of courses on erosion and sedimentation, and in fact taught some courses on both. And it's very complex. The processes of erosion and the even more complex processes of sediment transport and sediment deposition. And these are really key considerations, key elements in the history of humanity. I mean, it's no accident, it's no coincidence that China and India today have the largest populations of any nation. Those were among the two primary, what are called hydraulic empires, where massive river systems created erosion and transported these sediments to lower areas and created highly productive agricultural areas, and forming the foundation of early human populations that have continued to grow to this day. So sediment is something that needs being considered very importantly. Now, often the basis for our evaluation of options is cost. How much does it cost to do something? And we choose the lowest cost option all too often. But these costs are based upon a human perspective, getting people to get up and do things, and how to extract resources and put them to work for us, rather than looking at what's really in those materials, in those raw materials. When you do an analysis based upon what's called embodied energy or emergy analysis, sediments contain some of the largest concentrations of energy that we're going to find in our economic system. So we'll talk more about that in the coming week, how some of these methodologies of evaluating things on a non-conventional basis, more of an ecological economics rather than our traditional low-cost economics. And then he talked about energy and biodiversity, or energy versus biodiversity, not just looking at how much energy it takes to produce other energy, but what are the biodiversity and the ecosystem impacts of these? And that's a very qualitative assessment. And it's important, I think, for us to try to assign numbers to these. And that's often discussed in the context of ecosystem services and the attempt to formalize the process of assigning value to these very important services that the natural system provides. So we'll discuss more of this in the coming week and attend some of the sessions that will touch upon this topic. But I think that the movie and the discussion here gives me motivation to pursue some of that later on.
Yeah, the other thing he touched on, and we've been seeing this week, is the cost of solar and wind are coming down considerably. So I think the cost of solar has been reduced by 90% in the last 5 years. So that's going to make some of these other energy solutions less viable, which is a good thing.
Well, not just the cost, but as I was saying, the embodied energy. 20 years ago, the break-even payback time for the energy that goes into fabricating this infrastructure, this solar and wind infrastructure, was on the order of 10 years. In other words, you put up a solar panel 20 years ago, it wasn't really generating net energy until 10 years later. So as you ramp up your production and your installation of solar, you're actually creating a short-term deficit in your energy. You're creating more greenhouse gases than you're really serving. But not only have we driven down the cost, but we've driven down the energy payback time from 10 years down to, some say, less than 1 year. And combining that decrease in energy payback time with an exponential growth in deployment really is going to generate enormous benefits on the carbon side for society. And I'll share some of those numbers later on in the week.
So it's clear that coal is no longer the cheapest energy source. So I think we'll be able to pretty effectively sunset coal mining and coal-fired plants. And the next one, obviously, is oil rigs and drilling, which I think people will start to turn away from oil and oil rigging and those fossil fuels. I hope so. Then the third echelon is these dams, which are providing for a lot of countries that need to fuel their economies and provide electricity for their people. The dams are an easy solution if you have a rushing river, as we have in Nepal or in Peru, but we might be able to turn the tide on those too. We just have to see whether the solar and wind and the infrastructure bill that was passed just yesterday in the U.S. is going to fund a lot of the transmission from the source of winds, because the windmills are all out in the ocean, or somewhere in remote lands. So traditionally, the power generators would be in municipal areas. They would build them next to municipal areas. So now the big question is, how do we transfer all that power to the areas that need it? So, that came online yesterday will help in the U.S. North America. So we're sort of looking at all this, and there's definitely a transition taking place. I think the reduction in cost of solar and renewable energies may help a bit. Leaving that with you, John.
Well, I'm just saying I'm thankful for today's Sunday to get some rest, and so we can tackle this again hard in the coming week.
Yeah, we're going to be monitoring all next week. Starts again tomorrow. So thanks everybody for tuning in.
Also,
it's
going to be a race between, I think, you and me and Michael to see who gets to the conference first tomorrow for those 8 a.m. Obama tickets.
You may get that golden ring. All right. Well, listen, thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been a pleasure to share these thoughts and the work of Bruno Monteferri. And we'll be back with you again tomorrow. So thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it.